just a couple more of these, okay, on Instagram. We're almost done, okay? This one had more to do with the culture. And here's one of them that we posted on Bill Moore Thinks.
Okay.
Aren't all of the most oppressive tyrannies in history sincerely initiated for the good of its victims? See, obviously I'm thinking about today's political climate right there, where I'm saying if you look back in history, when you see the Bolshevik Revolution, right, in the Soviet Union, you're like, in Russia at that time, you're like, well, when Lenin's enacting these things, or Stalin, does he think he's doing it for the good of the people? And the answer is, mostly. In Stalin's case, it's hard to tell 100%.
Yeah.
But in Lenin's case, I think so. A lot of that self is in these guys.
Yeah, of
so
course.
You,
a lot of
you
it.
lose that. But if you think about the radical changes in history, in governments, people mean well. Like Mao, he's going to right the ship and do away with the rule. You see these kind of things foment, and then you end up with what? You end up with these tyrannies where millions of people die. And really, since 1900, we've got 100 million and counting in people who have died, and they've taken control of these people. Well, it's the very thing that people want to surrender now in the United States, right?
Yep.
This freedom. Which brings me to this point. If I'm right and the culture is headed this way, where unthinkingly people are surrendering their personal liberty.
Yes.
I always am brought up by this Lenin quote that he said, look, liberty is a precious thing. That's why we're going to ration it carefully.
Ooh.
Might have said wisely. But you understand? So he knew the control, you couldn't let the man, you have to be careful and ration it.
Yeah. It's like
but
the opposite. Yeah.
Why in the world, and this brings up something that I want you to think about. We have a revolution here in this country, right? 1776, we're new, right? We have a revolutionary.
Yeah.
The French, who I have great disdain for in general, historically speaking, nothing personal. They're going to have a revolution, literally, 1889.
Okay.
Okay, kind of a thing. So you see, not 1890, 17, anyway, following our revolution.
Okay.
When I'm talking about the American Revolution and the French Revolution comes second.
Okay.
There's two different mindsets. The American Revolution, we have these states uniting, but there's states uniting.
Okay.
Okay? And the reason I'm saying this is they have what Thomas Sowell calls, who's one of my favorite people. If you don't know who Thomas Sowell is, you're missing the boat here. You want to know Thomas Sowell.
How do you spell that name?
Sowell.
Okay.
He's 91 now. He's a brilliant man. He's an economist and a really a philosopher of some sort. He might laugh if he heard me say that. I don't think he would, but he might. So he's been around a long time.
He's a good thinker.
And he's a very good thinker. He has more clarity on subjects, at least for me, than anybody I've run into.
Wow.
So he has this book called Two Visions, I think it's called, from 87, and then I think he redid it in 2007. He's talking about this very thing. The United States Revolution has a constrained, is the language he uses, and I'm not fond of that, but it's what he uses. Constrained view of the world. It's constrained by what? Constrained by the realization that you're a fallen human being. See, remember how I try to say to you, everything in life begins with theology to me. Because I'm a Christian, I'm able to see that human beings are fallen.
And when you say fallen, what do you mean?
I mean, they're full of sin. It's their natural inclination is to
do
sin,
wrong.
to do wrong. They're selfish, they're envious, they're petty.
Yeah.
All of those things, right? They're angry, violent, whatever you want to see.
Whatever comes out.
All of that's part of a fallen human being when Adam sinned.
Right.
Okay. Now that's a constrained vision for Thomas Sowell.
Okay.
Now what it issued forth in the American Revolution what happens is you've got these states
Yeah.
who combine for a united front, and you say to yourself, well, they did it because they loved each other? No, they feared each other. They demanded states' rights.
Okay.
Why? Because Jefferson knew that there was something wrong with the human being. What happens in history, he could see nations war against nations. If you divided this land up into nations, you'd have Germany and Poland and England, and you'd have wars. You'd have Italy, right? You're going to get
Right.
fights.
Right.
And so he said, well, look, let's combine them. Imagine if they'd have been able to do that in the old world. Kind of like they're trying to do today with the economic system.
Yeah.
But that's ingrained. Here we had a new world. So they could do this. And even though Jefferson was certainly not a Christian in my mind, he was a deist. And so he would have believed in God. And he
That
knew
there is a
human
God.
nature enough. He wasn't silly enough to
Right.
think human nature was good.
Right.
So these people unite to protect themselves and to keep their own boundaries. Now today, we've lost this constrained vision when you want to turn all states' rights over to federal rights. It's the very thing those founders feared.
Yep.
They did not want a strong federal government.
Right.
They recognized they needed a federal government, right?
Right.
But they didn't want it to be strong. So they put in the three branches. Now the French come along, and being the French, they look at it and they say, what's wrong with these people? They're building in trouble. They've got to have agreement. And here's the French arrogance that's really born of the Enlightenment thinking that I'm the guy with all the answers.
Okay.
They don't want the king anymore. All right, they want to do away with that despot. But who are they going to replace him with? A Congress? A president? And a judiciary? No. It's set up not to have it flow. No, what are they going to replace the king with, who's bad, by the way, they say? So what do you think it is when you're arrogant and an atheist?
Well, with themselves?
Sure, I'm
Okay.
smarter.
Yeah.
All we need
Yeah.
is I just need to do this.
Yeah.
I'm pretty smart.
Yeah, you got it
right?
figured out.
We just find the best of our elites. See, so now they have what's called in Thomas Sowell's world an unconstrained vision. Constrained, man's got this human nature you got to guard yourself against. It's
Yeah.
why you build a fence, right?
Right. Makes a good neighbor,
It's,
but it keeps
it's
it.
why you
yeah.
lock me into my room at night. No,
Keep him safe.
keep me safe.
Keep everyone else in the house safe. You're
No,
such a mess.
It's such a mess. But you understand
Yeah.
now.
No. Yeah. That's what you like.
These are
yours and I-
theological views.
Right.
They'd say, Bill's silly. There's not such a fallen. There's stupid people.
Yeah. Leave your door
There's
unlocked.
ignorant people. There's Bill.
Yeah.
And then there's us,
Yeah.
right? Because we're really the brights. We're the intellectuals. We know what's best for Bill and all of the poor teeming masses. See? If you don't, Bill's got this built-in government headache thing. Because they don't trust each other. Shoot, we'll just get a genius to run this. Every time you see this in history,
Yeah.
you realize it's a theological mistake.
Yep.
Whoever that genius is, he's a fallen person. Now, you will see this government work one day. Where?
Heaven.
In heaven.
Yeah.
Right? When the perfect King of
King of
Kings is
Kings,
governing it,
right.
you'll have a good leader.
And there will be no sin there, so you can leave your door unlocked.
But you don't need a judiciary. He's the,
He is it.
Yes.
He's the ruler.
right? So when you see that, you're in safe hands. But here, no. So the French do that. And of course, what ends up happening is whenever you get this set up, it's bound to fail. Because your little propped up substitute king, because it's really what you're doing. You're
Yeah.
just saying that's a bad and stupid king who got here by being born into a family. I'm going to get the one that we pick. Well, we still are mankind tries to do that throughout time. Only the United States has been resistant to it till now. So, oddly enough, to me, this started it's been going on since 1700 or just before, but it never really works in the United States because we're sort of different. We're sort of independent, and we still had states' rights. We start surrendering them in the 60s. You're going to see that I have a very low view of what took place in the 60s from here on forward. Federal government domination, anything towards centralized government is frightening to me. I think it will be to you if you realize what's come from it. So that we get this thing today, and honestly, as Thomas Sowell would say, and I'm saying amen to Thomas Sowell here, it reaches its zenith in Barack Obama, who's a man. Why am I critical of Barack Obama? Well, Thomas Sowell, who happens to be black, is very critical of Barack Obama. Why? It has nothing to do with the color. I could care less about that. But it has to do with this idea. You've got these elites, and you know that in the end, you're going to pit elites always against enterprise. The working class, the businessman, right, he has to deal with enterprise. I have an idea. I want to start a restaurant. I better have the right costs. I better have the right labor. I better have the right management. I better have a handle on whether it's needed, what's the population, what's my draw, all those things.
What are you serving?
And if my theory is wrong, what happens?
You pay.
That's right. You're living in the back of a truck somewhere,
Right.
because your husband tried and failed.
Right.
Okay, but Barack Obama, just all the Barack Obamas, I'm just saying he's the one that people worship at his thing, and as Thomas Sowell said, his real gift is to make nonsense statements that sound profound.
Sure.
You know, people can argue with me as long as they want. I'm
Right.
happy to have that argument. Just pull up his speeches and and you'll see him doing things. Now, here's one of the ways it really affects you.
Okay.
And it starts a long way before that. Not only did the French fail because of their wrong view of mankind.
Right.
Let's go back to the First World War. Okay? The First World War is a terrible war. You know, it's a big cost. It ends, right? And we're talking about, coming up to 1920, and we're getting, in my mind, now, instead of the dancing girls and the prohibition, we're getting eugenics, which I don't care for. But let's suppose that you think only of that. The world's got two different views at that point. The constrained view is mankind. We've got the Germans under surrender at the moment. We're making them pay back debts. But we don't trust them. That's the constrained view, according to Thomas Sowell. And I would know that because they're fallen people over there, and they're prideful fallen people. I'd want to know what they were up to. But you see guys like one of my favorites, Bertrand Russell, the old atheist, who I have he's calling for total disarmament in England, right? Because he's going to make peace with the world by disarming. I'm going to lead the way and throw my weapons away. Well, it sounds familiar, doesn't it? So we're seeing Joe Biden do essentially the same song and dance right now, okay? So, but surprisingly, guys like Neville Chamberlain are doing this, and they get sold on it. And you'd be surprised who else is in this camp of disarm at any cost at that point. We're going to show the world the way. That's why after 9/11, you start, mere 7 or 8 years later, you hear these speeches by McCain saying he's going to raise the number of people in the military. And he's not my favorite or least favorite guy. He's just a guy, McCain to me. But Barack Obama, whose really main achievement at that point was rising up through the Illinois House of Representatives and graduating from school. He hadn't really done anything. He hadn't owned a car wash or a giant company. He doesn't know anything about enterprise. So he's going to be in that elite status against the guys that I like, the guys who have some tried and true failures and and understand a little bit about commerce and how somebody working for you might actually steal from you.
Exactly.
Right. That human nature, you learn a lot when you own a business about human nature. So you see him saying, I'm going to make my first speech to the Muslim world and declare, that we're all willing to have peace. But he doesn't ask, what are they like? Are they warlike by nature? Does their creed, for instance, think that a convert by force is the same one as one by persuasion? You need to ask yourself those questions. He doesn't. He's assuming that if you put out the hand of peace, you get a hand of peace in return. Well, that really hasn't worked out historically. Now, you can wipe out history and explain to me, and you'll notice that every one of these movements, like Mao, tries to make sure that nothing of Chinese history is kept from before 1960.
Yes.
You see it happening in the Soviet Union. Stalin's going to wipe out history, basically, so that he can unite you under this idea that he has. Well, you can see it. The last Confederate statue in Virginia or something was torn down the other day, like Robert E. Lee's statue. They're going to do away with the memory of that. But one of the problems with that is there's this insidious thing where they're taking away history from you altogether and making it sound like it just began, like those people were stooges and you aren't. And federal government is really good now. We need to turn everything over to what? Guys who can't even run the health program for veterans. I mean, these are track records. No government, because they're not enterprise people, they are really elites. They've never been any good. You can check it out in any country, not just the U.S. You will not find them to be good.
Right.
Now, that means what? You need a practical person, really, I think, to run countries. It's not a business, but it doesn't hurt to be practical.
Yes.
And have some experience with it.
Right.
Being an elite just leads you to think that you know what's best for the rest of us, us poor morons. And that's always proved dangerous in history. I'm not asking you to believe me because I think it will happen. I'm asking you to take a look backwards.
Right.
Oh, guess what? We don't teach history anymore.
Yeah.
Because we don't really want Juliana to know how it works and why you have these two visions that Thomas Sowell is talking about. And I'm saying that because all of the things that I'm talking about come from this root. If I'm right, your fallen nature, once I recognize it, I have to guard against it to a certain extent. When especially if you're born again, I still have to recognize it.
Yeah.
But it will make policy for me on how I treat people, right? And why I install cameras, right? And how I will treat war, because at the very time between the wars, Neville Chamberlain's calling for disarmament, and what is going on in Germany? Rearmament. Okay? So we're going to have World War II because these guys got it wrong.
Yep.
And they got it wrong in their vision of how the Germans would be.
Yeah.
They misunderstood, and they just wanted, if we're going to be peaceful, everybody wants peace. No. Well, Hitler comes in 1933, he doesn't want peace. Right? That's what ends up happening. And it seems plain to me that these guys in between meant well, but they misunderstood human nature. And that's why I'm saying to you in closing, human nature is fallen. Thomas Sowell will call it flawed, but it's fallen, right? It's because of Adam. And it's got 1 million diseases in it, right? All envy, all those things. So what ends up happening is you guard against it, you govern against it, right? You be careful to put in safeguards.
Yeah.
Because the best of us are still not perfect.
Right.
But if you're an elitist, you see this world from up here and you say, well, if they just do what I say, because I actually know how to orchestrate this, they'll all be happy. In fact, that's where communism and socialism start to look really good. Because you're like, we can have a perfect society. And I'd raise my hand and say, honey, we are never going to have a perfect society. And he'd say, why not, Bill? And I'd say, because I'm here. That's what's wrong with your perfect society. I'm still alive. Okay? And so is my brother, by the way. There's no way this is going to work out. I'll be envious if Juliana gets rewarded and I don't. I don't want to do that work. I don't mind if you work hard. I don't want to. I'm lazy. Right?
Yeah.
See, but you can't see that from the ivory tower. So it doesn't matter if you're Joe Biden or Barack Obama or the next president that comes from that tower. That tower is a dangerous thing to me. It's right away, I'm I'm worried about anybody who comes from that group. And I don't care if he's a Democrat or a Republican.
That's right.
It's dangerous to me. So you have to be thinking, if you're me, that if I change, I change the church, because the church to me needs reformation.
For sure.
The church is reformed, the culture reforms, because the church is the light, the city on the hill. Okay? The city on the hill is shining, the culture changes, then you can worry about electing the right politician, because you'll be wise enough to. Okay? And the politician will give you what you want, because politicians give you what you want, right? They only reflect what the people are thinking. They're really, when I'm talking about these elites, they don't have to be the President of the United States to be those guys.
Right.
Right? You can get guys like Jeff Bezos, right? Where he's influencing like he is now, or you're going to get all of those guys who control your media today, right? You better watch their politics. And what you'll watch is that you'll say, well, Bill, he runs a company like that. And I'm saying, I know he does. And so he does understand some of these people. But does he understand the guy I'm talking about, the guy who works in Peoria, Illinois? The answer is no. What he understands is that circle of friends, right, that he has up there. And you watch him, and every time you see him, he will misunderstand human beings, right? And he wants a one-world global government because we're all swell fellows. And he doesn't make allowance for all the ideologies out there of fallen people. And therefore, he's not prepared for war. And when you surrender in Afghanistan, like we have, every Black Hawk helicopter and whatever else is going on, and now you're trusting the Taliban. This is September 13th. We've just had the 20th anniversary, right, of the bombing of the towers. And it is fresh in my mind how absurd it is to think that 20 years has changed that group that provided a safe haven, right, for those terrorists. Looks to me like we're back in the game of being forward-thinking instead of looking at history, and I think it's a mistake. That's just my opinion.
Something to consider.
Yep.